I'm Eric Lanigan with Lanigan&Lanigan, attorneys in Winter Park, Florida. As most of you know, we over the last many years have done quite a bit in the bankruptcy field. And I'm often asked in all types of bankruptcies, whether it's business or personal, what is bankruptcy fraud? And I guess I can answer it pretty succinctly. Bankruptcy fraud is a felony. It's serious business. It's committing perjury. It can put you in jail. So anybody who's coming in to see us or any other lawyer in regards to bankruptcy, a few bucks in debt one way or the other, which probably is not going to get paid anyway, whether in bankruptcy or not, is never going to be enough to risk going to jail. Because as one lawyer said to me one time after his house had been washed away in a flood, he said, well, if money's your problem, then maybe you really don't have a problem. And he had a great attitude about losing his house. And I've always remembered that statement. If money's your problem, maybe you don't really have a problem. Well, yeah, you probably do. But that money problem is nothing compared to spending several years in an orange jumpsuit and little rubber sandals. So bankruptcy fraud is a felony. Now, there's a lot of issues about what really constitutes fraud. Now, there's a lot that goes on in bankruptcy planning that is, I believe, perfectly legitimate, and it's things that we do on a regular basis. And as I've said to many people, like tax law, which, by the way it's written, creates certain incentives to do something and disincentives to do something else. Well, bankruptcy law does the same thing. By the way it's written, it is naturally going to create an incentive to do one thing and a disincentive to do another. For instance, one of the things that we run into often is where both the husband and the wife work. We had a case recently where both the husband and the wife had very, very good incomes. The husband made slightly more than the wife did, but all the savings that they had accumulated was in her bank account. Not really savings, but money that recent earnings that had not been spent. And the reason is because they were using his bank account, his paycheck, to make the mortgage payment and the car payments and all the other expenses that go along with daily life. Well, in bankruptcy, the income of the head of household is exempt. Income for this earned during the 6 months preceding the bankruptcy is exempt, irrespective of what amount it might be. I filed a case, the largest case I ever filed with an exemption for earnings within the previous 6 months was $38,000. And the trustees don't like it because obviously they'd like to be able to get that money, but the law is the law. And I had it recently come up where we go into bankruptcy with that exact same couple, where I had advised them, stop spending the husband's earnings, start spending the wife's earnings, because if you're talking about bankruptcy, why would you want to spend money that would otherwise be exempt and accumulate money that won't be exempt and the creditors would take? So the bankruptcy law creates an incentive to spend the earnings of the lower income earner and accumulate the earnings of the higher income earner. That is not fraud. First of all, it's fully disclosed. And second of all, it is merely responding to the incentives and disincentives that are within the law. And there's a big difference between those two things. Another thing that always comes up is credit cards. And I've always had a very simple statement with credit cards. I said, now that you've been in my office, you've talked to me about bankruptcy, from this point forward, if bankruptcy is an option that you're going to consider, it's real simple. Don't pay them, don't use them. Because you're not going to pay a bill that in a month or 2 or 3 or 6 is going to be completely discharged in bankruptcy. There's a complete disincentive to do that. So why would you do it? and it's certainly not fraud not to do it. Now, where can you get into a problem with fraud? Well, somebody thinks they're too cute by a half, and they go, well, my recent taxes are not dischargeable in bankruptcy, but my credit cards are. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull money out of my credit cards to pay off my tax bill, discharge the credit card bill, and aren't I cool because look what I did, I manipulated the system. Well, it's not going to work. You're not going to go to jail for doing that, but if it comes out to light, you're probably going to be denied a discharge, or at the very least that credit card debt is not going to be discharged. So there's fraud, which is out and out lying to the court. I had a situation recently where an individual owned a condominium with a relative in a city, over 1,000 miles from here, several states over. And we're going through their whole scenario, and I'm thinking to myself, well, this is going to be easy. And then sure enough, as often happens, well, there's one more thing I forgot to tell you. And you go, okay, here it comes. And so she tells me that, well, I own this condo with my relative in such and such city, and we probably have about $300,000 of equity in this condominium. So her half's $150,000. So my first thought is, you couldn't tell me that from the beginning. We wait 45 minutes, an hour before that finally comes out. And then I immediately talked about, well, that pretty well blows the whole concept of filing bankruptcy. We're going to have to move to another method to deal with this debt. And this person responds to me, well, gee, do you think they would really ever find out about that? And it's just amazing. You think, well, if they do, you'll go to jail, and I'll lose my license to practice law. So I really don't care what the odds are that they find out. I'm not going to lose my license to practice law, and I'm not going to watch you get carted off to jail. So what are the odds? I don't know. I don't care. I'm not doing it. I had that happen in a case one time, and a guy was in my office, and he had this very big, bright gold Rolex watch, and I made a comment about what type of exemptions they had, and he sort of looks at his watch and he says, well, don't worry, this will disappear. And I thought to myself, well, no, I think what's going to disappear is you. And I literally just got up and I very calmly walked around my desk and I said, well, Mr. Jones, it's very nice to meet you, and I wish you luck getting all your problems resolved, but not that way, not here. And so have a nice life, see you later. The most important thing I think to remember is, unless you're just an out-and-out criminal and you're just using bankruptcy as a method to scam people out of money, inevitably, even if bankruptcy is not the resolution, the safe resolution of your issues, there are a lot of different ways to deal with debt and to deal with it effectively. It may not be as cheap as bankruptcy, but it'll certainly keep you out of jail, and it will be a lot less expensive than what you think it will be. So if you think you're committing fraud, then step back, get advice early and often. If you're thinking that bankruptcy might be an issue, and if I do this, would that be fraud, or is it a legitimate pre-bankruptcy planning tool that can be used? Again, I'm Eric Lanigan with Lanigan&Lanigan, attorneys in Winter Park.